Hey everybody, what is going on? What is going on? Welcome to the broadcast. Welcome to the broadcast. My name is Curtis Brooks. I am executive coach for high achieving men. And we got a great conversation this evening, guys. We got a powerful conversation. We're talking about leading from wholeness, not need. That's the title of our conversation, leading from wholeness, not need. Now, during this conversation, we're going to be talking about a host of different things here. Hopefully, this conversation is going to uh, give you some tidbits that you can place in your own life, and that you can actually learn from, glean from, and take the next steps in your own healing process. Again, my name is Curtis Brooks. I work primarily with men as an executive coach, high achieving men. So, that being said, again, we're talking about leading from leading from wholeness, not need. Now, in this conversation, again, we're going to be covering multiple different things here that's going to help us to really kind of solidify this conversation. And I've got some notes that I've taken, and I'm going to be reading from some of those notes. So hopefully this conversation connects with you, and that you can grab what you need out of this conversation and apply it to your own life. First, there's a difference between wholeness and need, obviously, and wholeness does not necessarily mean a complete 100%, and it would be nice if it did. But in actuality, wholeness doesn't necessarily, in a way of just people. This is the human part of us. There's no perfect person. We get that. So wholeness does not necessarily mean a complete person, a person who doesn't make mistakes, a person who has never met challenges. In fact, it is just the opposite. And I think that in order to have that wholeness that's needed, thank you, Angie, for joining over on TikTok. I appreciate it. So that wholeness, again, in order to get to that wholeness, again, that human part of us, we in fact will have to go through some things. You'll have to go through some things. You'll have to clear some hurdles, some obstacles, and unfortunately, a lot of those obstacles and hurdles were already established in the earth. We're already placed in our families, things that we're dealing with, and in most cases, a lot of times, the things that we're dealing with, I would venture to say they're not all it's not all of our stuff. And because I like to say, in working with the clients that I work with, is that a lot of what we're dealing with is the stuff that comes from our parents, their parents, and so on and so forth. And it is absolutely unfortunate that is the case, but that is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with our parents' stuff, their parents' stuff, and so on and so forth. And now the challenge is that we've taken on a measure of debt, so to speak, in regards to the things that we need to get over, the things that we need to get under, the things that we need to change. And so, unfortunately, a lot of those things that our parents dealt with or their parents dealt with, a lot of those things were, in fact, uh, the things that they dealt with, but now they're been placed in our lap, and we have to do the due diligence to be prepared to um, break break those curses. And I'm going to put it out there: break those curses, because in fact, if we're carrying those same things from one generation to the next generation, and in fact, they are absolutely what they are. They're curses, and unfortunately, that's what happens. And now, excuse me, let's look at the need part of this versus the wholeness. The wholeness part of it, again, it absolutely comes from a space where we have worked for some things, and it does not mean that we are perfect as human beings. Absolutely not, because that's just what we're up against. Sometimes there are going to be those not perfect moments in life, and that's just the way it is. But here's the need part of it. The need part, again, that leading from wholeness, not need. That's the title of this conversation. The need part is the man or woman. And as I stated earlier, I work with high achieving men. So the need part is for the man or woman to really kind of be, for lack of a better word, to be put asleep, so to speak. And so the need person, the person who's leading from a place of need, is typically the person who is leading from a brokenness, a place where he or she has not he or she has not or feel recognizes that there's something missing. This person, in most cases, the person that's leading from a place of need. In most cases, this person is leading from a place where they're reactive rather than proactive. Now, in order to get to the wholeness piece of this thing, when you're leading, now let me put it this way: leading. I speak about a lot about leadership. Now, leadership is absolutely important, and a lot of times the challenge is that we as people and generally we don't see ourselves in that leadership role or taking that leadership space outside of a business or outside of something that we're, some organization that we're leading. But in fact, leadership absolutely well before we get to a place where we are leading organizations, you must be able to lead your own home. And even if not your own home, let's just say you don't have a family. I mean, it's maybe just you by yourself. But even if you don't have a family member, an extension of yourself, or a husband, wife, spouse, whatever, even if that is the case, we have to be prepared as men and women, being prepared to lead ourselves through the muck and briar of our own personal lives. And this is just a challenge in itself. A lot of times it becomes difficult for us to hold space for being accountable within our own lives. And when we are not accountable for the things in our own lives, we can absolutely find ourselves leading from a space of need rather than wholeness. And again, recognizing that wholeness is not a perfect person. But here is what wholeness is. Wholeness is a person who recognizes that, hey, I've got stuff going on too. And I'm prepared to put a measure of accountability within the things that I'm dealing with. And oftentimes, because you have the other people who have challenges with accepting accountability. Now, this is for men and women alike. Now, we have a difficulty accepting that accountability. And when we can't accept accountability, be it man or woman, you cannot, you don't have access to the very thing that you're trying to change if you're not going to hold yourself accountable for the mistake or the mishap or the misinformation. And whether it's done intentionally or not, we have to be prepared to acknowledge the challenges that we're facing. We have to be prepared to acknowledge the mistakes that have been made, or the mishaps, the misdirection, or just been given the wrong information, or just we thought we knew how to do X, Y, Z and find out that we don't know how to do it. And we've made a mistake. And when we can hold ourselves accountable and be prepared to make the changes, to be prepared to make the adjustments, then and only then can we begin to make that transfer, so to speak. We can then begin to start to lead from a place of wholeness. We can begin to make the journey now. There's a mountain of need and there's a mountain of wholeness. And as men and women alike, we have to be prepared to make the transfer. Life in itself is it's tough. It's not always easy. Definitely not always easy, but we do have to be prepared to make sure that, or at least understand that there are definitely distinctions. And a lot of what we are dealing with, be it man or woman, a lot of what we're dealing with is coming from a place of need. It's coming from a place where certain conditions have not been met, or situations have been met, things that we're missing in our own lives, be it the father, be it the mother, either way, there are things that we're missing in this life. And And now at some point, now even recently, I'm going to be very honest with you. Even recently, I've had to face some things myself, and I think in life we can find ourselves pointing the finger, myself included. We can find ourselves pointing the finger at someone else. Unfortunately, we can certainly find ourselves pointing the finger at someone else, but in reality, or as there's a saying that you point the finger at someone else. There's like two, three, four, five, six, whatever, pointing back at you. And this is what's the thing that I recently experienced, is that I were I was no different from the other person, and it is it's a wake up call. It's a wake up call. And don't get me wrong. I know there's certain needs in life. Absolutely, there's certain needs in life, and I think the challenge is oftentimes that we can find ourselves putting those needs on the other person. Excuse me. We can find ourselves giving the other person, the responsibility to fulfill those needs, especially within a relationship. And oftentimes it is the relationship that where these needs are not met oftentimes. And I would even venture to say is that it is the beginning of where these needs are not met is ideally typically from our home. And when the needs are not met within our own family, excuse me, we have a tendency as we become adults, we have a tendency to take those needs, those unmet needs into our relationships. And those relationships can be personal relationships. They can be obviously private relationships, and they can also be our professional relationships. And here's the other piece of this thing as well. Oftentimes, because we as people, we think that, okay, I'll put this over here. This belongs over here. I'll put this in this bucket. I'll put this in this bucket. Thank you, Gypsy, for joining. I appreciate you. I'll put this in this bucket. And we have different compartments for each of these different things that we have not dealt with, or we're going to put on the shelf, or I'll fix this later. I'll get to this later. But here's the reality or the misconception often that we don't understand is that life in itself is a circle. And unfortunately, I don't know so much unfortunately, but because life is a circle, life has these buckets that we have separated these or compartmentalized these different things that we are dealing with or have not dealt with. They have a tendency to mesh themselves. Hey, thanks for joining. Is that Saber, Sabr? Thank you for joining. Life in itself, those things that we have compartmentalized, they have a tendency of meshing themselves into one area of life and yet into another area of life. And so, in fact, the very things that we have deemed as personal, we can find those things spilling over into our private lives. And the things that we have deemed as private, we can find those things spilling over into our professional lives. And when that happens, things obviously kind of get muddled. And now we can find ourselves really not knowing where the beginning of a thing is because of all these things that now have meshed. And it becomes hard to absolutely separate those things. And again, we're talking about leading from wholeness, not need. I went over earlier that wholeness represents not a perfect person. Wholeness represents a person who has decided or made a decision to get on that journey. Life is about healing, ladies and gentlemen. This is about healing. We have all been given a layer or layers of stuff. And as I said earlier, most of us have been born into something that we had absolutely no control over. But here's the reality now. It's now in our lap, and we have to be prepared to take care of it. And not take care of it in the sense of that we are nurturing this thing, but we have to be prepared to look at this certain thing or whatever it might be that we're dealing with, or a host of different things that we may be dealing with. We must be prepared to look at this thing or things. We must be prepared to analyze certain things. We must be prepared to ask the difficult questions of ourselves. Because if you are in life, and you have had one relationship after the other. You're breaking up in one relationship, and this person isn't right. It's always something wrong with this person. There's always something wrong with that person. Come on now, let's just be honest with ourselves. It cannot always be the same. It cannot always be the other person. And this is what I've had to discover by my own self. None of us are perfect. But if we're not willing to deal with our stuff and commit ourselves to the leading out of wholeness rather than need, oftentimes we can find ourselves waiting for the other person to get themselves right. We can find ourselves hoping that the other person will get themselves right. Well, if he gets himself right, then I'll do X, Y, Z. If she gets herself right, I'll do X, Y, Z. That's not how it works, ladies and gentlemen. But unfortunately, that's what happens. We are waiting for the other person to get themselves right, but now we are in avoidance of the things that we need to take care of. And again, unfortunately, It, that is how it works, but it's not how it works. Uh, is that NATL? Thanks for joining, guys. I apologize. I can't always see the comments here, so sometimes I have to. Okay, I'll put it over here, make it closer. Sometimes I have to look away here. I can't see them clearly. But nevertheless, so it is important for us to, as men and women alike. I know commonly, as I said earlier, I work primarily with men, but this is a people thing. This is a man and woman thing. Again, learning, leading from wholeness rather than need. Leading from wholeness rather than need. When we're leading from a need, we will inadvertently, and again, I don't necessarily say every person that enters a relationship they're coming to sabotage your relationship, but the reality of it is that if you have not endeavored to take care of the things that you keep tripping over, I'll put it that way. If you have not endeavored to take care of the things that you keep tripping over, the things that keep tripping you up in relationships. Yeshua, thank you, Save, thank you for joining, appreciate you. If you have not endeavored to take care of the things that you keep tripping over, and again, that is for each of us. We know, each person here on this live here, you know exactly what your issue is, or at least maybe not all of them, because some things sometimes we don't know. But if you've been in one relationship after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other, and again, I'm not saying, a lot of what we all go through in life, it is absolutely finding ourselves. Whether you're trying to find yourself or trying to find the right mate, but the reality of it is that you got to find yourself first. You got to find yourself first. And oftentimes we want someone on this journey with us, unfortunately. And it is absolutely nice to have someone in life sharing this journey of life with us. But what happens is that when we haven't found ourselves, we inadvertently, we're on a mission, again, not through a person acting purposely to destroy another person. But when you don't know yourself and you can find yourself continuously putting the other person in front of the firing squad, so to speak, and thinking that it's always the other person, at some point we have to be prepared to look at ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. This is the hard work of becoming whole. This is the hard work of being healed. Because when you're not healed or on that journey, you're going to continuously trip over the same thing over and over. And it'll always be someone else's fault rather than you and I taking responsibility for the thing that we are continuously tripping over. I'll share a quick story with you. Many years ago, I was in a relationship. I'm married now, but I was in a relationship for a long term relationship. Matter of fact, and uh, the woman I was involved with, she was call herself stepping out, or trying to connect with somebody else, hook up with someone else, and I was crushed, man. I was absolutely crushed, man, and I didn't know quite how to deal with it, and also just yeah, I couldn't even put the words together for it, but I was crushed, man. I'll be very honest with you, but nevertheless, there was a huge part of me where just again just taken back because I had put so much into this relationship, and it's just like, how dare you? Again, just broken over this thing, and I found myself in a place where I was doing the very thing that I never thought I would do. That was verbally abusing her, because I was crushed. I wasn't necessarily in a place where I could just financially, where I could just pack up and go. And I guess a part of me felt stuck, and I was kind of ticked off that maybe I was stuck and just going through stuff, man. It was a dark place in my life at that particular time. But nevertheless, here I was saying some awful things, man. I really was. And just crushing things towards her. And it wasn't absolutely not the right thing to do. Was not the right thing to do. And but that's where I was at. And absolutely leading, and I wouldn't even call it leading, but operating from a place out of need. Operating from that low place called need. And when we are healed in life, we make different choices. When we're on that journey to wholeness, we make different choices. And there's a point I was trying to make this with this somewhere I was going with this here. So, here's what I was going to say. Here's the thing. During that dark time in my life, I can remember apologizing to her each time I had said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it." Blah blah. And again, I didn't mean it. I absolutely did not mean it. But it was what I was going through. Is how I was processing or not processing the pain, the hurt. I couldn't get her to talk about it, and just again feeling like I was just in a place where I was stuck, and I wasn't stuck, but just the mindset, just where I was at. And so here's the point to all of this. Even in the midst of me apologizing to her, when I had broken my own word, when I had, when I had fallen out of agreement with what I said I would not do, and I had broken that promise and continued to berate her with just awful things. And each time I apologized to her, she would say, "Oh, you're just going to do it again. You're going to do it again." And I'm saying all this to say is that this is what life is like sometimes. And my prayer is that you're not in that situation. But here's my point. Even in the midst of all of that, I still had to make a decision to grow up. I still had to make a decision to be prepared to lead out of wholeness rather than need. Even in the midst of her doubting me, and me even doubting myself to a degree, I had to be prepared to change, not because I was waiting for her to change her language. Not because I was waiting for her to say, "Oh, he's going to become a better person," and hoping that she's going to give me the encouragement that I was looking for. Waiting for her to say, "Oh, I know you didn't mean it." No, I needed to change, and I had to walk that path alone. I'm not complaining by any stretch of the imagination. My point is that this is the reality of life. We cannot wait The man cannot wait for the woman to comfort him, to rub him on the back and say, "Hey, it's okay, honey." And no, don't get me wrong. Sometimes those things are absolutely can be absolutely comforting. But the reality of it is that it is for the man to be prepared to come out of need, leading his household or their lack of out of need, dealing with his private matters or personal matters out of a need rather than a wholeness, dealing that in his professional life out of a need rather than a wholeness. It's for each man to make that choice and to include women. This is a people thing. This is not just a man thing. It's not a bashing men, a bashing women. The reality of it is that when we miss the mark because of life has just dumped on us, as I stated earlier, oftentimes, or all of us, not oftentimes, all of us have been born into this stuff. It wasn't ours. We had no idea what we were going to be born into, who were going to be our parents, what individuals were going to parent us. We had no idea. But nevertheless, good, bad, or indifferent, the stuff is now in our lap. And we had to be prepared to dismantle it. And you have to be prepared, almost like a surgeon, be prepared to dismantle. Jean-Claude, thank you for joining. We have to be prepared to dismantle that ticking time bomb, if you will, so to speak. Because what happens when we don't dismantle those things, and again, we can say, hey, that's not mine, that's not ours. But the reality of it is that in most cases, we're acting out of that stuff. We're acting out of the stuff that's not ours. But in fact, it is ours. And it becomes that much more pronounced for the fact that we don't even know that it's there. In most cases, we don't even know that we're operating out of it. But there is a cause to pause. When we have been in and out of relationships over a period of time, one after the other, broken relationships. Oh, he's this, she's that, blah, 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 just going back and forth. At some point, there has to be a cause to pause, a cause to take a break and begin to think. Because in most cases, the only way that we're going to change our outcome or the results of our outcome is that we begin to think. Because without us putting our thinking caps on, we can find ourselves duplicating the patterns, guys. That's what we're walking out. We're walking out a pattern that had existed well before you and I were thought about. So it's not to blame the woman saying that the women are awful or the men are awful. That's not what this conversation is about. This conversation is about making a decision to lead out of wholeness rather than need. And when we can make a decision to lead out of a need, when we can make a decision to lead out of a wholeness, then we can find ourselves on a path to correcting those things. That's the wonderful thing about this life, man, is that we have an opportunity to make some corrections. We have an opportunity to change some things. It's not over for you and I. It doesn't have to end the way that it began. But you and I, we get an opportunity to fix this thing. But in order to fix this thing of what we're going through, I absolutely know the pain some of you may be going through. Maybe not all of you, but I too, as a human being, have gone through my own challenges. None of us in this life will be without the challenges. Because as I stated earlier, in most cases, many of us are bearing the weight of our parents, so to speak. We're bearing the weight of what they've gone through. And unless we are prepared to dismantle that invisible time bomb that's ticking, if you will. And we can hear the ticking. Here's how we can hear the ticking. We can hear the ticking each time a relationship fails. There's the ticking. Each time a relationship fails, we can hear the ticking. Then it becomes a need for us to inquire why the relationship failed. It becomes an opportunity for us to inquire and ask ourselves, what do I need? What am I missing? What am I calling upon the other person to give me that I'm missing? Now, this can be tough, guys. I'm gonna be honest with you. This can be tough because the reality of it is that we all have needs. We all have needs. But here's the other piece. Oftentimes, those unmet needs start from home. They start from our respective families when we're small children. Mom and dad weren't perfect, and so on and so forth. Their parents weren't perfect. And it's not about being perfect, but it's about growing up and becoming mature in who we are as people and building healthy relationships. And let's face it, most of us haven't known what healthy relationships look like, myself included. Most of us have not. And when we can accept that and begin to not always look at what I need, then you can know what a healthy relationship looks like, or at least be prepared to inquire about what healthy relationships look like, because they're in fact around us. They're all around us. But if we as people are so much set upon our needs, marvelous speaker, thank you for joining. If we're so set up on our own needs, it can be very difficult to know what a healthy relationship looks like. A healthy relationship starts with healthy conversations. But if we're so focused on the need, what we did not get, because in most cases, if we didn't get it from our parents, we're absolutely placing the burden on our spouse or that significant other in our life. The girlfriend, the boyfriend, we're placing that need on them. And in fact, in most cases, they have needs too. And because they have needs, we can find ourselves meeting in the middle. Meeting in the middle. He's not getting his needs met. She's not getting her needs met. And I'm not going to do XYZ until he does this. I'm going to be the wife that I need to be, because if he does this, I'll do this. Or if she does this, then I can be a better husband. And in fact, that's not how it works. Because the longer we find ourselves not responding to the call, the pull, the tug, if you will, that ticking, if you will. Again, the time bomb is there, invisible, appearing to be invisible, but the ticking in most cases, the timer, the ticking on the time bomb, on that invisible time bomb, is louder than anything, because it shows up in a way of our broken relationships. It shows up in a way of our refusal to accept accountability. That's what the ticking is. It's us not accepting accountability. It's us always pointing the finger at the other person and saying, hey, it's you, not me. And again, as I said earlier, the most difficult thing for me to do was years ago was to try and change, or not try and change, but change in the midst of my ex-girlfriend. I'm married now, but my ex-girlfriend, earlier I was sharing of a story during a time I was dating someone where I had verbally abused a one, and it had been going on for months. And as much as it crushed me to do those things, as I talk about those things now, it just was a place where I was at. And, I could absolutely, be ashamed of that for sure. It was crushing. Psalm 465, Lucy, thank you for joining. It was absolutely a crushing place. It was a very dark place for me. But I had to make a decision to grow, even when she doubted me. Even when the man doubts the woman, you still have to make a decision to grow. And that's what I did. I had to make a decision to grow in the midst of the other person doubting me, because I said, oh, I'm sorry. I'm not going to do that again. I apologize. And here I found myself slipping of the tongue again, saying some awful things that I shouldn't have said. But there I was saying those things. And again, you have to grow even in the midst, even when it seems like things and people are against you. We have to make a decision to grow. We have to make a decision to climb that mountain towards wholeness. Guys, I'm going to be the first to tell you, or the second or the third. I'm not sure not the only person that you've heard this from, is that dealing with our stuff is not easy. It is not easy. It is not easy. Hey, Mozart Woods, thanks for joining me. I appreciate you. It is not easy dealing with our stuff sometimes. And in the midst of dealing with our stuff, we have to say, that's mine. We have to make that embarrassing. We have to make that embarrassing walk, the walk of shame, so to speak. Hey, that's mine. I know I entered into this relationship, a certain way, but now you're seeing my stuff. That's embarrassing in itself. But in order to lead from wholeness, not need, we have to forego the embarrassment. We have to be prepared to walk anyway. We have to be prepared to do it anyway. And when we begin to shoot for wholeness, so to speak, versus leading from a need, which most of us have, man, let's just face it. Most of us have started life leading with a need, trying to do life with a need that is not unmet. That's most of us, if not all of us, myself included. If not all of us have been trying to do life with unmet needs. And when these needs are unmet, we can find ourselves blaming the other person because they didn't give me, or because he didn't give me what I needed, because she didn't give me what I needed. We can find ourselves blaming the other person. Now, here's the good news now. Here's the good news. The good news is that you can make a decision to say, I want to heal me. Now, even if you're married, you can make the decision too. I want to heal me. Whether you're single, I want to heal me. Because as I stated earlier, most of the stuff that we're dealing with, it is an offshoot of what our parents dealt with. And what our parents dealt with is an offshoot of what their parents dealt with, and so on and so forth and so forth. Now, again, there is no perfect person, ladies and gentlemen. There's no perfect person. A lot of what I've had to grow into is by listening to other people. I found myself listening to, not only listening to other people, excuse me, but I found me. I found me in listening to other people. I found areas where I had been deficient in. So it's not about trying to fix everything at one time, because it can absolutely be overwhelming. It can be crushing. But again, I had to find me listening to other people and their mishaps and their mistakes. And here's the thing that I recently found out, I think I touched bases on this earlier, is that while here I was looking to point the finger at my wife on certain things, I found out that, hey, I've got stuff to work on too. And it immediately had my mouth like it was glued shut. Because the old saying, or it's much old saying, there's a scripture in the Bible that talks about the man trying to remove the plank out of the other man's eye, but yet, or to remove the speck out of the other man's eye, but yet he had an entire plank in his own eye. That was me. I had a plank in my eye, trying to get the speck out of her eye. And once I recognized that, it humbled me. I've been quiet, and to a degree, I've been quiet for the last several weeks now. It humbled me, guys. And there has to be that level of honesty with ourselves, guys. It has to be that level of authenticity within our own selves, because if not, you will continuously operate out of a need rather than wholeness. There has to be that level of authenticity, that level of vulnerability within your own self. I get it. It can be difficult being vulnerable in the midst of a disagreement with your spouse or significant other, your partner, whatever the case might be. It can be difficult saying, hey, that's mine. I did that. I'm sorry. It can be difficult doing that. But in your own time, in your own space, when it's just you, and if you can't find the time to be honest with you when no one is around, perhaps when you're driving in your car, listening to music or whatever the case might be, listening to a podcast, if you can't be honest with yourself, then there's a problem. You can't even begin to uncover the things that you need to work on. And here's the interesting thing about this wholeness, leading from wholeness, the need. Here's the interesting thing about it. When you can lead out of wholeness, you can get access to certain things. The other side of a brokenness, or the other side of leading out of a need or a deficiency, is fulfillment. That's the other side of it. And as long as we're leading out of a need versus making a decision to lead out of wholeness, and again, this wholeness does not mean people are perfect. It is absolutely a journey, guys, of learning to know thyself in the midst of all this other stuff that's been placed upon us. That's what this is. It's a journey. It's a walk. It's a commitment. And when we can find ourselves or allowing people to pull us away from that commitment. Each and every time distract us with the promise of something that we need, we think we need, or not so much think that we need, with the promise of fulfilling that need that was not fulfilled by our parents. And again, this is not a ding against our parents. Once more, none of us are perfect, but we can start, or at least begin to break the cycle of leading out of a need versus out of wholeness. We can make that decision today and begin that healing journey. If not, we can find ourselves leading out of a deficiency. And what happens is that you and me, our deficiencies attract other broken people, ladies and gentlemen. Our deficiencies attract broken people because we are broken ourselves. Soulful Consciousness, thank you for joining. Appreciate that. Love that name. But we are broken ourselves. And so we are going to attract the very thing, the likeness, the like mind, so to speak. The old saying is birds of a feather, what? Flock together. So if you are been in a relationship for any extended period of time, or in a relationship now, and you are experiencing the constant bickering, the constant confusion and things of that nature, the dissatisfaction with your spouse or your partner or your significant other, whatever the case might be, whatever situation you might have, is that if you're finding yourself in a constant dissatisfaction within those spaces, begin to look at yourself. And this is not a dig towards you or anyone else. Sometimes it's us looking and waiting for someone and hoping someone's going to fill that void. Excuse me. Because that need is essentially a void that has not been fulfilled. And no person can fill that need or fulfill that void. So we have to be prepared to make amends with that and let the other person off the hook. Because in most cases, it's not their doing. It's not their doing. So we can find ourselves completely being off the chain and expression as we are sharing our being dissatisfaction with our spouse, partner, or significant other. We can find ourselves sharing all these different things. But the reality of it is that we have to begin to look at ourselves, because there's an energy that we bring to the relationship. Just as well there's an energy that they bring to the relationship. And when both of these energies meet, again, it causes conflict, because at some point it's not settled here. When it's not settled here and here, at some point we can find ourselves looking for that person in our lives to help settle the score. Help me settle this score. Help me fill this void. And we end up putting a burden on that person to fill that void. And in fact, it's not their responsibility to fill that void. And in most cases, they have a void as well. And it's not your responsibility to fulfill their void. At some point, we have to be prepared as men and women to put those things out there. I don't know if many of you are men and women of faith, but for me, that's where I found my 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 redemption. That's where I found my redemption in my faith. My wife can't be my savior. Your spouse can't be your savior. Your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your significant other, your partner, whatever your situation is, none of these people can be your savior because, in fact, they're in need too. And so we're all searching for something. But here's the thing. When you and I make the decision to become whole, or at least get on that path of calling out our stuff, seeing where our stuff has played a role, or seeing where we have played a role in the confusion, in the chaos. Because I'll be honest with you, I don't think relationships are that difficult. They can be. They absolutely can be. But if we're not ready to look at our stuff, because I think naturally people, we want to find someone to put the blame on. Again, this is not a dig towards men or women, but the reality of it is that we want to find someone to put the blame on. We want to give an excuse. Again, this is not a dig. This is just the nature of people. And we have to be prepared to look at the nature rather than what we are expecting. Because when we can look at the nature, we can see the reality. And when we can see the reality, thank you, user 841, so on and so forth. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Evelina. Thank you for joining. Appreciate you. So when we can see things from a reality perspective, meaning from a clear path, so to speak, then we can make those changes. But until then, looking at life from a perspective of what you didn't get and what you are in need of, it absolutely blurs the path. It's hard to see the other person. It's hard to come into a healthy relationship when we have not settled the score in here. Primarily what we did not get from our parents. Again, this is not a dig from on our parents. Doesn't make them bad people. It makes them human. But when we didn't get those things from our parents, we will inevitably place what's missing into the relationship or on the person within that relationship and begin to demand, so to speak, that they give us those things. And yet the other person has demands too. And oftentimes, because the other person has a demand, we can't see what they're asking for, because in most cases, our demands speak louder than anything. We can't hear the other person. And sometimes even take it a step further, or a lot of times taking a step further, is because we're not getting what we need. We can end up disrespecting the other person. We can end up abusing the other person, be it verbally, mentally, emotionally. Hey, Kairos, thank you for joining. We can end up abusing the person emotionally, mentally, even physically, because we're not getting what we need. But again, it's not the other person's job to fulfill those needs. It's up for us to come to a resolve of what we didn't get. Because for what we did not get, rest assured, life has it, be it man or a woman, there will be some individual who will show up and be prepared to give us what we need. It's not their job, but they will be prepared to give us what we need from a space of manipulation. And now we are find ourselves being led through sheer manipulation, because in fact, they have a need that's unmet as well. Actually, I've been watching a lot of videos recently about narcissists. And narcissists come in all sizes, women too, and obviously, this the most of the talk has been about men, but narcissists come in all shapes and sizes, to include women. And I've had to come to this wake up call, so to speak, and look at my own life, look at my growing up from my mother. I didn't grow up with my biological father, so that's why I'm saying mother. But and how. All right, guys, bear with me. I got to put this puzzle together here. All right, so I've had to come together with a just a or concede. I think it's a great word. I have to concede on some things and say, wow, again, as I stated earlier, sometimes we can be so caught up in looking at the other person and ready to put labels on the other person too. And we have to be also prepared to look at ourselves. Because when I discovered that in my own household there was narcissism, and I've never had anyone call me a narcissist or anything like that, never. And that's still not the case. But I've had to listen to other conversations on people talking about narcissists and look at my own behaviors, even in my relationship now and previous relationships as well. Because rest assured now, here's the $1 million ticket here. Rest assured is that if you have been in a relationship with a narcissist, again, whether it was your parents, whether it was your parents, or whether it was someone that you were in a relationship with for an extended period of time, you have to be very careful now. Because in most cases, the need that we were missing or looking to be fulfilled by, again, it's not necessarily saying that we came with a list, but there are those quiet things that are within all of us that the other person fulfills, and we don't necessarily we may not necessarily be able to put our finger on it, but that person fulfills those needs. And in most cases, there are the needs that were not met through our household growing up. So the long and short of it is that we have to be prepared to look at ourselves, guys. And if you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, or again, even with parents being narcissistic, we have to be mindful that as much as awful as it may have been to be in a narcissistic relationship, or being with a person with narcissistic qualities or mindset, or whatever the case might be, we have to be prepared to check ourselves, because it could be. Thank you, Bob, for joining. It could be that we could be experiencing these things within our own selves, giving them to the other person, and not knowing that we are doing the same thing that we didn't like. when it was done to us. So we have to be careful with that. The old saying is, I don't know if the old saying, but psychiatrists, psychologists say that the saying is that hurt people hurt people. So the likelihood for any of us who have been in again abusive relationships, be it with a narcissist or parents of a or our parents were narcissistic, we have to be careful that we have not taken on those traits ourselves. I said earlier is that during this time when I was dating this woman years ago now, how I had verbally abused her. Again, it's awful. I even hate to share this with you, but I'm gonna I want to be authentic with you. But I hate to even share that story with you. But the reality was that was me. That was me. It was awful. That was me. And I can remember growing up when my mom did that to my father. She was horrible towards my father, and I can remember saying to my man, I was I felt emasculated from listening to my mom do that to my father. This would be years later, because obviously when I was younger, I didn't even know what that word meant. But years later, I can remember I felt emasculated, and I can remember saying to myself when I was younger, oh, I would never do that. Blah, 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 blah. That's horrible. But here I found myself years later doing it to this woman I was dating at the time. So again, we have to be mindful of that. Sometimes the very thing that you hate in the other person, sometimes we can find ourselves picking it up as well, inadvertently. And this is just what we've been exposed to sometimes, guys. So it's not a dig. It's just understanding that sometimes that when our own needs are not met, the very thing that we said we would not do, those things have a tendency of showing up. The very thing that was done to us and that we cried and just, it was just awful. We have to be mindful that we're not taking those same traits or those same experiences and bringing them into a new relationship. Those are the things, if we're honest with ourselves, that we have to fight. Or else, be it the man or a woman, you can lose someone who truly loves you. Because now, in some cases, you become the person that you hated. You become the person that you feared in a previous relationship. So you have to be very, very careful. And not only in being careful, sometimes we just have to slow down in life. This is how we get to that place. Judette, thanks for joining. Thanks for joining, Timbo. And our heart, thank you for joining. But yeah, we do have to be mindful that if we're not slowing down enough in life, having those moments of reflection, we can find ourselves operating out of a pattern or program, so to speak, that's been placed on top of the programming that we grew up with, good, bad, or indifferent. We can find ourselves operating out of a new program that's been placed on top of our belief system or their lack thereof, because in most cases, that's what those people come to do. They're taking something away from you or have taken something away from you and filled it with something else that you needed or looked like something that you needed. And this is for men and women both. So we have to be very careful, and it does take a healing that needs to happen. If you've been in an extensive relationship with a narcissist for however long, you have to be prepared to say, "Hey, I need some work done. I need to cause for the pause, or pause for the cause." However it goes, you have to be prepared to pause for the cause. And if we don't pause for the cause, we then place those burdens, the pain that came, or the pain that comes from not having those needs met. There's a pain that comes from not having those needs met. And when those needs aren't met, whatever those needs are, each of us are different. Whatever those needs are, there's a pain that comes from those needs when they're not met. And in most cases, we place the burden on the other person. Men and women both will place the burden on the other person. And the other person can find themselves feeling completely inundated with our stuff. Like an emotional roller coaster. They don't know whether we're up or down. Completely overtaken, overwhelmed by our lack of just not getting our needs met. And because we didn't get our needs met, we place that shopping list in the cart of the other person. And the other person can absolutely feel like they're walking the aisles of a grocery store and trying to get everything that you need. And at some point, you're still not satisfied. This is real, guys. This is real. This is real. So there are absolutely two paths that we take in life. There are absolutely two paths we will take in life. The path of wholeness. That path of wholeness does mean forgiveness. Forgiving yourself for being duped, feeling like you've been duped, you've been lied. This person absolutely did not have what I needed. Been lied to. So we have to forgive ourselves. I know many of you may have heard, oh, forgive, forgive, forgive. That's all people are talking about because that's what it's about. You can't access certain things that if you have not forgiven yourself, or if you have not forgiven the other person, you can't access certain things, guys. Forgiveness gives us access to seeing the world or seeing things in a different perspective. You can't access the right perspective if you don't forgive. You can't access hope if you don't forgive. You can't access freedom without forgiving. You can't access anything new without forgiving. Without forgiving yourself and the other person, you'll continuously make yourself available for, in most cases, most of the same thing that you've been trying to escape from. You'll potentially see that every man is a dog, or the men, every woman is a blah, 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 whatever the case might be. You'll potentially see each person, oh, everyone's the same. And in fact, they're not the same. But because of our lack of forgiveness of ourselves and the other person, we can't see the difference. Everyone appears to be the same when we have not forgiven ourselves and we have not forgiven others. Life just looks absolutely mundane when we have not forgiven ourselves and forgiven the other person. It's not about changing them. As I think I clearly stated earlier, it's never about changing the other person. It's about doing the necessary work for ourselves, because we can't determine or place a determination on their destination or on their destiny. That's not my job. That's not your job. But you can be prepared to figure out where you want to go. You don't have to keep going the route of one broken relationship after the other. But you do, and you should be prepared to ask yourself questions when the relationships are not working out. Because in most cases, it may not always be about the other person. In most cases, I'd be willing to say about 99% of the time, it's not about the other person. It's about what we have committed ourselves to erroneously, and a lot of times. The things that we have committed ourselves in a way of not forgiving ourselves and or not forgiving the other person. Again, when we can find ourselves forgiving the other person. Hey, Southern Cal girl, thanks for joining. When we can find ourselves forgiving the other person, we can absolutely find ourselves now being prepared to access healthy relationships, being prepared to access wholeness versus operating out of a need. And when we have not forgiven ourselves and forgiven the other person, we can absolutely find ourselves again looking at life as mundane. The men are dogs. They don't never change. They'll always be the same. The women are this and that, and they'll always be the same. And that's not true. That is not true. It truly is about this mind changing. That is not true, ladies and gentlemen. It truly is about us acquiring access to the other side of the pain that we may have we've been dealt. The other side of that pain. We have to be prepared to get to the other side of that. But if we're not prepared to get to the other side of that, what happens? We can find ourselves pointing the finger at the other person saying, it's them, it's them, it's him. Why can't I find love? Why can't I find blah, 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 whatever the case might be? Why can't I get what I need? Which is really the crux of this conversation. When we're not getting what we need, we place the burden on the other people. And when we place the burden of the other people, we can find ourselves getting mad at them, or worse, being physical with them or verbally abusing them because they're not giving us what we need. And looking at relationships from the lens or from the perspective that, hey, relationships are all the same. I'm going to be alone. And you don't have to be alone, but you do have to deal with the unforgiveness that might be there. Forgive yourself and forgive others. Because without that, as I stated a few times now, without that forgiveness, you can't access healthy. You cannot access healthy without the forgiveness. That's just a reality. That's not something I'm making up, something I'm just dreamt up or just pulled out the air. That's the reality. We can't get to the other side of healthy if we're still holding on to unforgiveness. You'll never see it from the right perspective. It'll always be someone else's fault. When the clear problem is that you've been denied access because of the unforgiveness. That's what the problem is. You've been denied access because of the unforgiveness. Wow, guys, I can't even remember what time I started here. Let's talk about leading from wholeness versus leading from need. And here are some of the things that are something that you might say. My value is inherent, and my leadership is an expression of my identity. Now, that is a space coming from a space of wholeness. Again, that's my value is inherent, and my leadership is an expression of my identity. Again, that's coming from a place of wholeness versus my value is determined by my achievements and my performance. Now, that's coming from a place of need. And this is where a lot of us are at, unfortunately. Our value lies in our accomplishments, our achievements. And that's in 99% of the time, and the work that I do with high achieving men, this is one of the bigger issues right here. This is one of the bigger issues right here that I'm dealing with men who, again, this is not a dig on men. This is just a reality of what the world has given us, so to speak. Is that my value is determined. Now, this is leading from need. We see it from a perspective that my value is determined from my achievements and performance. Again, one of the bigger issues that in working with high achieving men is that I deal with is that is one of the biggest things that the problems that they come across is that their achievements, people look at them for their achievements and the performance things that they can do. And most of the men, and just reality, here's what what most of the men are saying is that they want to be recognized for who they are. But here's the double-edged sword. If the man doesn't know who he is, he can't put that forward. He can't obviously be forthcoming with that because he doesn't know himself. He can't even begin to establish that when he doesn't know himself. And obviously, if he can't establish that, the other person can't see it. Be it a personal relationship or a professional, a working relationship. For us men, if we don't want to be looked at for what we do, and again, there's nothing wrong with I get it. I work with these men all the time, so I absolutely get it. There's nothing wrong with doing things and achieving things and being, just operating at the top of your game. There's nothing wrong with that. But what happens is that the world, again, most of these men, they want to be recognized not just for what they do and how they perform or their ability to get things done. They want to be known for someone with more depth, with a depth to them. But the challenge is that they themselves and the men that I'm working with, a lot of times, they don't have the depth there. And if they don't have the depth there, what happens is that they will meet women, connect with other friends who are just as, I hate to say it this way, but just as surface, I'll say it that way, just as surface as they are, including the women. But the women themselves are looking for depth. Now, this goes both ways, ladies and gentlemen. It goes both ways. I'm just sharing with you in that because I do work with high achieving men, this is some of their biggest challenges. And so naturally, the men feel like they're not seen. They feel almost invisible. Much in the same way with women. Much in the same with women. Feeling invisible, feeling not seen, not heard. And so here's the thing. That's why it's so important to get on this journey of healing. Excuse me. This journey of wholeness. Not perfect, because we know no human being is perfect. But to begin the journey of healing. That's why it's so important. Because the journey of healing gives us depth. It places depth in our hearts. Some of you may have seen that an image where it shows of a mountain that's in the ocean or in a body of water, where you see the top of the mountain maybe 200-300 feet high, or just proportionally higher on the very top. But in the very bottom, you see a root system or part of the rock or the part of the mountain at the very bottom. And maybe it's just a little bit, but the point of it is that in life, we have to be prepared to position ourselves to grow a root system, so to speak, to go through some things in life. And a lot of times we can find ourselves trying to escape these things. And while we're busy trying to escape them, we are essentially not growing any depth to us. And without the depth that's absolutely needed, even in order to have this conversation with you, there's a place of depth that this conversation comes from. And likewise with men and women both, there's oftentimes no depth to the relationship. It's what I just read to you. Leading from a need. My value is determined by my achievements and performance. That's not very deep. That's pretty surface. And unfortunately, that's oftentimes what people are dealing with. Leading from wholeness says purpose, values, and inner conviction. Leading from need says external validation, fear of failure, and then the need to prove worth. There you have it. There you have it. In most cases, that is what we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen. I'll read a few more here. I know I've been on for a little while now. This is actually kind of fun here. Good conversation. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it as well. So leading from whole is abundance. There's enough for everyone. Leading from need says scarcity. Resources are limited. I must compete to win. Guys, that's a major difference. And can you imagine? I'm going to read a couple more here. Just not too long of a list, but I'll read just a couple more here. Again, leading from wholeness says leading from wholeness is proactive, intentional, and aligned with a clear why. Versus leading from a need is reactive, frantic, and driven by the urgency of the moment. And I'm going to read one more. Because I want to make a point here. Leading from wholeness, creates an opportunity. Now, I'll say it this way here. Response to failure, okay, that was actually the main point of that conversation here, is response to failure. Leading from wholeness, this individual's response to failure is an opportunity for learning and growth. So now leading from, response from failure, this is how the person responds, or the mindset of the person who's leading from wholeness. They say, oh, this is an opportunity to learn from growth. All right. Versus the person who's leading from need. Their response, leading from need, their response to failure is a threat to identity and a source of shame. Now that I've read those to you, can you imagine the burden that you and I could be placing on our spouse, or in a previous relationship, previous marriage, the burden that you may have placed on your spouse, the burden you may be placing on that boyfriend, girlfriend, your significant other, partner? Can you see the burden that you may be placing on them? And vice versa now. It goes both ways. So when these needs are not met, this is inevitably the burden that we place on each other. And it's not always a quiet burden. In some cases, it's a demand that we place on these people because of what's missing here. Again, I just read to you the response to failure from a person leading from a need. He or she receives that response to failure as a threat to their identity and a source of shame. Can you imagine trying to have a conversation with this kind of a person? Or better yet, if it's something that you're dealing with, can you imagine why a person is not able to have a conversation with you? Myself included. Can you imagine why a person could not have a conversation with you? Because when you failed at something or were short on something, in the midst of that person being there, you felt a threat to your identity, and then and it became a source of shame. And so, feeling that threat to our identity, what happens? We want to cover ourselves up. We want to protect ourselves. And sometimes, and in protecting ourselves, we can be very rude or hostile to the other person. So can you imagine what the other person might be dealing with as it relates to us, our response to failure? Can you imagine? The person with the leading from a wholeness, the mindset says abundance, there's enough for everyone. The mindset of a person leading from a need says scarcity, resources are limited, and I must compete to win. Can you imagine that operating from this space and place of need, the confrontation when the person that you may not even know in a sense of a relationship, but maybe on your job professionally, that now you're being stretched to broaden your mind. And all of a sudden you're conflicted now because you're operating out of a need. And that need says scarcity. That need says my resources are limited. That need says I must compete to win. Can you imagine what the other person may be dealing with in our need and your need? What did you put the other person through in your need? The things that you needed and they could not give to you, what did you put the other person through? And you can say, they put me through all kinds of stuff too. And I would absolutely believe that. But I'm talking about you, because we can only fix ourselves, right? What could you have put the other person through, according to what I just read to you? Approach to work, leading from a wholeness. That person is proactive, intentional. This is their approach to work. The person who's leading from wholeness, proactive, intentional, aligned with a clear why. Person leading from a need, leading from a space of need, is reactive, frantic, and driven by their urgency of the moment. Can you imagine how hostile that situation could be? Can you imagine the hostility that you presented to the other person? Can you imagine? Maybe you were there. Maybe they put you through some things. But again, as I stated earlier, we can't change them. We can only change ourselves. And oftentimes we have to do this work even when other things aren't working in life. That's the reality. We have to be prepared to do this work even when other things are not working in life. We have to keep forging ahead, because inevitably there's going to be someone that says, much like I was sharing with you in the story of my situation earlier, is that you're not going to change. You're going to continue doing the same thing. You may be in that situation. I don't know. But you have to make a decision to keep on trucking. You have to make a decision that when you fall off that horse, is that you're going to get back up and get on again. Keep riding. Because eventually, if you keep pressing in with a desire to change, you will change. So this conversation was not about bashing men, because I absolutely love, as a man, I absolutely love the skin that I'm in. This conversation was not about bashing women. This conversation is about making a decision to be made whole versus operating out of a need or from that need. Because when we're operating from that need versus a decision to be made whole, and it does not mean, I don't want to make it seem like it's easy, because it's not easy, guys. I'll be very, very honest with you. It's not easy. It's work. It's falling and having to get back up. It's falling and feeling the embarrassment and getting back up. Because you've got assignment to complete, and it's about changing you, because eventually you want access. You want access to the things that are on the other side of those crushing blows that you may have been dealt with as through different relationships. You want access to the things that are on the other side, outside from the things that we're all born into. You want access. That's the primary goal here. Because as long as any of us are living life out of a need, out of a deficiency that was not fulfilled, we can find ourselves going from one relationship to the next relationship, to the next relationship, so on and so forth, to the point where we can find ourselves deciding to just not do life. Why? Why do I need to do life? Why do I need to be a part of anyone's relationship? Hey, Marcus, and thanks for joining. Traveling Man, thanks for joining. The Laborers Voice, thank you for joining. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you, Eugenia, for joining. They trust Zero. Thank you guys for joining. I appreciate you. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this conversation. I've said giving you some nuggets here. Again, guys, it is absolutely about a decision that we all have to make. And when you have been faced with one broken relationship after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other, again, you look at, guys, sometimes we have to look at our relationships with our parents. How did mom and dad operate? Was mom and dad together, or whatever the case might be? And again, it's not a dig. It's not a trying to take you back in history and say, hey, you should have got this, you should have got this, and because you didn't get it, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that you and I have the opportunity to break the back of that nonsense, that we're not going to continually carry this nonsense into yet another relationship, because you, in fact, can have a healthy relationship, not only with yourself, first and foremost with yourself, by clearing up the stuff in here, clearing up the stuff in here. You can have a healthy relationship, but you have to make a decision to clear the source of confusion up in here. Not that you're confused, but it's brought about confusion because there has been no clear path, no clear why. There's been no resolution. And obviously the things that we are conflicted with, when we have not dealt with them or resolved them on the inside, they become those things that show up in our personal lives, our private relationships, and also in our professional relationships. So if you are endeavoring to have a healthy relationship with yourself first and foremost, and allow that healthy relationship to spill over into other personal relationships, private relationships, your professional lives as well. If that is you, you can absolutely send me a DM and I can connect with you and we can talk more about that. And again, I am a men's coach. I work with high achieving men. And that is our goal here tonight, guys. So hopefully this conversation has been a blessing to you. Hopefully this stuff has made sense to you. Again, it's not been a dig on either one of us as men. It's not been a dig on women. It has been a hope. A hope that we will see ourselves in this conversation. A hope that we will see ourselves in the conversations that other people are having, because that's in fact how I've learned how to see myself as well. Curtis is not perfect, nor am I claiming to be perfect. But my point in saying that is that I've had to listen to other people's imperfections to see myself sometimes, to see what I needed to change. Because we can enter relationships and say, hey, I'm good. I'm looking for this person, this right person. And after year after year and asking those questions, we still haven't found the right person. We have to be prepared to say, is it me? Is it me? Because if I have not found the right person and I keep getting knuckleheads, be it man or a woman, we have to look at ourselves. It's not a dig though. We have to fix this up first and then attract the things and then we can attract the things that are pleasing and pleasant for us, that are healthy, I should say. Excuse me. And I'm going to leave you with this here. The interesting thing about the Bible talks about sin. It covers quite a bit about sin. But here's the thing about this. When you have come into a truth about yourselves, sin is not necessarily the person who has done the gross acts, be it sexual or off someone, has taken someone's life. Not those things. Sin is really turning away. This is the truth about sin. It's turning away from what you know to be the truth. It's having found the truth and you deciding to turn back away, to turn away from the truth. It's not about giving you and I a pass for sin. But if you doing this work, you and I doing this work, we already know the stuff that we have gone through. We already know have taken part of the horrible experiences. And when you and I begin to come into a knowledge of who we are, that our eyes begin to open up, we begin to start to see clearly now, or clearer, I should say. And certain things are revealed to us. And if we allow ourselves, by the smooth talk of a man or the smooth talk of a woman, if we allow ourselves to be pulled back into that stuff because of our own desires, rather than looking at the truth, because the truth is not going to be so much fanfare. The truth is oftentimes quiet, mild, doesn't make a whole lot of noise, but it's there. Versus the lies sometimes, or the smooth conversations that may come from a man, the smooth conversations that may come from a woman. If we, knowing the stuff that we've gone through to come out of the situations that we've been in, and we've learned how to walk in that peace now, learn how to walk in that understanding. And now we find ourselves going back into the stuff that we come out of. That, my friend, is sin. That is sin right there. Knowing the truth. What's going on, Derek? Thanks for joining, brother. Knowing the truth and deciding to go back, like a dog returning back to his that is sin, my friend. To have spent time with the things that have, or to have experienced such challenges in life, and now to be brought to a place where you are experiencing the openness, the freedom, the peace, the joy, things that you may not have ever thought you were going to see. Because, in fact, it takes work being stretched. It takes work being stretched, ladies and gentlemen. It's work. So it's not an easy thing to get here. But if we allow the smooth talk of a man, the smooth talk of a woman to pull us away from what we know to be true, because now we've experienced this peace, this joy, this overwhelmingly joy. We know what it feels like. And if we allow the smooth talk of a woman to pull us out of a place of truth into, or back into a place of uncertainty, you, my friend, have sinned. So, that being said, guys, I am going to wrap it up, leave it there. And thank you for joining. Derek, thank you for joining. Marcus, M, Traveling Man. There's quite a few of you here. So again, I really appreciate you guys stopping to listen to the conversation. Hopefully this conversation has been a blessing to you. Guys, if I missed some of your comments or different things there, I do apologize. I'm still kind of getting myself, or at least figuring out how all this stuff works. I'm actually doing it from my my desktop here, my computer. But either way, guys, hopefully this conversation has been a blessing. We've been talking about leading from wholeness, not need. All right. So again, hopefully this conversation has been a blessing to you all. Thank you, and good night. We've been on for almost 2 hours, guys. So again, thank you all. Have a wonderful evening. Ciao. Bye bye.